All right, hello and welcome. Two things I would like to just put out there, and I would love some feedback for. One, this episode is sped up in the same fashion as episode 2, except I'm at 1.75 speed instead of 2 times speed. I think 1.75 is a little more watchable. Let me know what you think about that. And then also the future of the series. So there are 3 things that I would like to do, and just let me know if any of them stick out to you the most, what you'd like to most see in the future. But for one, I am thinking about continuing the Squire series, going into Insane with this Squire, and then making like a whole deck of Squires, which I think would be super cool to specialize them each in their own thing. I could also try this either from Hard or Insane right away with just one Monk and one Huntress, which I think would also be really cool because I wouldn't have walls, and that would, I think, be interesting. And something else I'd like to do eventually, maybe, and I'm not sure, and I think it's probably the least interesting of the 3, is doing an Apprentice only. I think it would be a cool challenge, but I think most people are used to seeing and using Apprentice Tower, so it's a little less of a novelty. So I don't know about that. Let me know what your thoughts are. If any of those stick out to you, what would you like most to see? As for the run, this is of course Arcane Library, and I'm sticking mostly with the Spike Blockade and the Harpoons, the tried and true setups here on each of the lanes. Now, with a full deck of Squires, here are my thoughts. I would have a Waller Squire and a Harpoon Squire, 2 separate Squires, and then the third one could be a DPS Squire, of course, but then the fourth I thought would be cool would be to have a Squire that specializes in some slice and dice towers and some bouncers, so that the stat priorities are all over the place for these characters. So the Wallers obviously fortify first and foremost. The Harpoon Squire is going to care about range, defense rate, and power, and then the Squire for bouncers and slice and dice towers would care about fortify, power, and defense rate, and not range, because of course they don't need attack range or anything. They have a very limited range. As for the DPS Squire, I'm not totally sure what I would prioritize in terms of what would be best. I could go the attack and physical damage route. I could also go the elemental damage route, where I focus on boost and then put elemental damage on the weapon, and then maybe some skill too would be valuable. I'm not really sure. I'll have to experiment and see what makes the most sense in that context, but either way, I think that would be really, really fun, really cool to do, and be an interesting challenge. I do think Apprentice only would be cool. Not having spike blockades is a huge deal. I mean, the fact that this can go as smoothly as it does on the Squire is a lot to do with the fact that I can use spike blockades and I have an easy way to deal with ogres. That's what I think would be most interesting, actually, about a Huntress/Monk playthrough. I don't think doing it with just one of them is really feasible. Maybe it is, but I think it would be interesting to use a combination of traps and auras, and then run around on one of them as a DPS character or someone, I guess. I think that would be really interesting, and I think that traps and auras are probably the most neglected of the defenses from most players when they're first starting out. I think it's pretty traditional to go with Squires and Apprentices as the defensive and offensive heroes and flesh out builds centered around those characters. I think it's rare to see traps and auras heavily featured, especially early game, of course. Once you get to Massacre, it's all about traps and auras. Towers take a huge nerf. That's neither here nor there, though. I think it would be probably a very interesting challenge to just run one Huntress and one Aura Monk and then play through that way. Okay, as for what's actually happening on screen, mostly Harpoons and Spike Blockades going down here. I am experimenting a little bit with some bowling ball turrets on the other side there, and I'm trying to make them work. I really want to make them work. I'm really nostalgic for the classic DD1 bowling ball turret, but it's just unfortunately not quite as useful in this game. I do experiment also in this particular act, or this particular stage rather, with some slice and dice towers, just trying to use them behind the protection of some walls. Doesn't really go my way. So a bit about how Act 3 goes. It's a little different than Act 1 and Act 2 in that I don't actually lose any matches at all. I have learned from my mistakes, although I do make a serious blunder later on, much later on, actually, but yeah, you'll know exactly what I mean when we get there. But anyway, I'm replacing a wall here. I think that where I had this wall before was what allowed something to sneak around and hit the crystal. The crystal did take a little damage, and I wasn't sure what it was because it did end up dying pretty quick. I did actually cross up one of the harpoons near the crystal to cover the crystal itself on one of the adjacent lanes in case that did happen, because occasionally it does. I have not quite mastered the wall placement on that particular lane, but Ogre is going to go down here pretty easily. Just lots of harpoon action, no surprise there. Here I am trying to make the Slice and Dice Tower work. I want to try to be able to make it do damage between the walls such that the walls take the damage. And the Slice and Dice just does some damage to the enemies and doesn't take any. But as you can see here, it's still receiving splash damage from the kobolds. What that tells me is that it's going to take some cleave damage also from orcs or an ogre if anything gets close and starts beating on the wall. So not a very successful attempt in that there. So even though I'm not able to make very efficient use of them in this context, Bouncers and Slice and Dice Towers do have some very nice uses. Bouncers are probably the single best tower for some flyer defense. In fact, I just dropped a video, I'll leave a card for it if you haven't seen it, for a Dragon Pet Run build that has some really low stats that it still works with, and it really lynches on some Bouncers to handle some flyer lanes all by themselves, and it works really well. In fact, the Bouncers rarely even take any damage. It's crazy, but they're great for that. Also, I have an upcoming video that I'm going to do. If it's posted by the time you're seeing this, I'll leave a card for that too, but it's not yet. I didn't even capture footage for it yet, but I do have a great use for the Slice and Dice Tower while farming the triple threat in Massacre. There's a spot you can stick a Slice and Dice Tower that does a ton of damage to the Demon Lord, so it does have some uses, as do the Bouncers, so they are not without their uses. They are great inclusions, and it may be possible to have a Squire specializing in them actually have a use case, especially in multiplayer when there's 4 heroes running around doing things. If someone's a dedicated Bouncer, Blockade, and Slice and Dice builder, then that's going to be useful. But here's the victory for the Arcane Library. Nothing fantastic, nothing special. In fact, this is pretty much smooth and easy at this point. My stats are such that I could have really just scratched Act 3 and jumped into Insane with my stats where they're at now. Act 3 is pretty smooth. The thing that's probably the least smooth, I guess, is the boss fight. As you can imagine, I end up having to do that with a solo builder, and it is an interesting fight. It was fun, and you'll see the fight in real time because I do play it later. But here we are in Royal Gardens, one of my favorite maps from DD1. Really love this map. It was one of the maps I played the most in DD1, mostly because it had some long straight lanes that you could do some cool stuff. I used to use bowling ball towers in this lane too. RIP the bowling ball tower, but it's got some beautiful scenery. I just really enjoy the map. But anyway, going to set up some more harpoons here, of course, as usual. Take advantage of the choke points that you're given by the map naturally. There are some flyers here that I do handle pretty effectively with some harpoons and whatnot. No surprise there. The Squire is adept at handling flyers. Anything to do with flyers, the Squire should be your go-to for handling them swiftly and smoothly. Actually got a question from Isaac Stecker on YouTube. Shout out, Isaac, if you're watching. But he asked about whether or not you need any other stat aside from Fortify for your Bouncers to be effective as flyer defense, because I talk about just using your Bouncers on your wall or Squire, dropping them, and just using your wall or Squire for everything. Spike Blockade, Slice and Dice, anything, really. And that the truth is that as long as the Bouncer can stay alive, it's totally fine. It bounces the Wyvern away from it, and then the Wyvern comes back and tries to attack it again, and it bounces it away. So as long as they can take a hit or two, it's totally fine. In fact, I recall using them in the Ramparts in Act 2, and my stats are certainly nothing special. My Fortify is actually, it's pretty low. All of my stats are low in these runs, obviously. I'm just in hardcore. I'm in hard campaign, rather. But, yeah, so the answer being they would benefit from power and defense rate, but you can totally just use your wall or Squire. The way that stats scale in the game, the earlier stats are weighted to be sort of more valuable and have more of an effect than the later stats. So if you're running a wall or Squire with, say, 1,500 Fortify, and you have 500 or 800 in the other stats, just consequently from your gear, that's plenty. That's definitely going to be plenty for the Bouncers to be effective as flyer defense for sure. But if your stats are lower, whatever you got, it's totally going to work. It's really more about the way the bouncer works that makes them effective. So they push the flyer away, and then it comes back, and they push it away again, and each push away does damage. If by chance the flyer gets a shot off on the tower, it'll take a little damage, but generally that doesn't happen much. So you actually see me in this build. I turned some harpoons toward the middle of the castle back there. That's just to cover a flyer lane, and I'm really at this point just stacking some harpoons up here. Harpoons and spike blockades gonna be what gets the job done. Plenty enough to kill everything on this map for sure. But being able to turn towers like that and cover multiple lanes, or cover, say, a ground lane and a flyer lane, the same tower, that's the exact reason that I say in my hero build guide that you should definitely, if you're using towers like harpoons or apprentice towers, that's why I say that range is like your top priority, because the sooner that you can have your towers cover multiple lanes, the more you can make very, very efficient use of your DU. So if you have the range to support a tower, say a magic missile or a flame burst, or like here with this harpoon, how I'm turning it to cover a couple lanes, or a ground lane and a flyer lane, absolutely do it, because now you can save yourself from having to put down another tower to cover that extra lane. Makes better use of your DU if you do it that way. It's just overall far more efficient. One thing else I'll say about placement for bouncers, I had a user, YouTube, Caleb Black. He on my most recent video, I posted a low stat build for running a dragon pet farm. Check out, I'll leave a card for that video if you haven't seen it. But he said that his bouncers die when he tries them in my build, and asked about replacements. And what I asked him was, like, what's killing your bouncer? Because one thing, if you're using bouncers for flyer lanes, one thing you should absolutely do is put them somewhere that spiders, or maybe like an ogre dropped off from a copter or something like that, put them somewhere that they're not going to be able to get targeted by other enemies. And you can generally do that, especially if you're covering flyer lanes. For instance, when I use them on the ramparts, I stick them on top of the house and on the very peak of the roof. And that is a great place for them because there are no spiders up there. A djinn, if you're playing in Massacre, maybe, will come try to take them. There are ways around that. That's your biggest concern, though. I mean, the spiders, they avoid them in the campaign. It's totally fine. You can put the way I place them in this series is what I use for placing bouncers when I played through the Massacre campaign. Also, the same exact spots. That's what I used, and I covered one of the bouncers with a gas trap, and that was plenty. So the gas trap would defend. Djinns get hard stopped by gas traps depending on placement. So yeah, it's about where you put them. And in my summit farm build for the dragon pet, I placed them on top of these torches, and putting them on the torches keeps them away from spiders, so spiders can't get to them, and then ogres just blow right past them. So you really don't want your bouncers to be the target of something else. You really want them to be specific to the flyer and kind of away from everything. You know, at some point I would love to do a sort of tower placement and tower synergy guide that focuses on where to put towers, because a lot of things are different in Nightmare and Massacre. Things change massively between Insane and then Nightmare and Massacre. A lot of that has to do with spiders. But then also djinns really change things up because they can fly around and they can just steal things. They can just take things off the map. So things aren't necessarily safe. A Sharkin do mix it up quite a bit too. Sharkin can literally just, they can just plow through your wall. So I would love to make a video on that tower synergy and how things go and how things change depending on what you're doing. But here you can see I place a bouncer. I'm looking to place a bouncer here. I'm just experimenting at this point. I like the idea of a bouncer up here as primary flyer defense, because there is a flyer lane that comes sort of straight over the castle right through that middle, and it does save me some DU and frees up enough DU to actually place 2 more harpoons here. And that's one of the great things about the bouncer is it's 4 DU. I feel like this should be titled, like, you know, about the bouncer or something. I'm talking about it so much, but it's 4 DU to completely lock down a flyer lane all by itself. There's so much value there. You know, you really want, when you're building your map out, you really want to look at the DU you're spending and ask yourself, what value is the defense that I'm placing down here bringing to the build? Am I getting the bang for my buck here? Is per DU, is this really worth it? And if you have a flyer lane that's not being covered by anything else, you need that covered. And if it only costs you 4 DU, that's a bargain. That's a bargain as far as I'm concerned. But here I go dropping some more harpoons, as you do, Squire only playthrough. And I got it down so that I am on 0 DU, which is great because I'll get that XP bonus. That's always nice when I can actually get that to happen because I don't have the benefit of apprentice walls to just drop 1 DU walls down to even that out. So it's nice when that happens for this playthrough and I get that extra XP, but I'm not counting on it. This harpoon up here on this little bridge is also nice. I can't remember. Sometimes I mix up DD1 and DDA, but there used to be flyers that would fly straight down the middle over that bridge, and you wanted a harpoon up there. I mean, harpoons were godlike in DD1. They're really good in DDA, but I mean, they were like, you can legitimately replace the apprentice as your primary builder with a Squire in this game. Looking at my stats here, just taking a peek and adding some level up points. Before adding the points, I'm sitting at 31 fortified, 92 power, 40 range, and 48 for defense rate. I added a few points in a couple of different things there, so a little bit better after the points are added. But here we go to Promenade. Now, Promenade is easily one of my favorite maps. It's so player friendly. If you run this with a DPS Hunters, there's so much you can do, and you can finish Wave 25 Survival Nightmare Hardcore in Promenade way before you can finish it on the summit. So it's excellent for farming up some Act 3 Giraffe on a Treadmill pets, and it's a game changer if you get some good ones. You can get some crazy good Giraffe on a Treadmill pets. In fact, I'll throw a picture up here of the best one I've ever gotten, 192 for the level ups, and the highest stat is 411 on the casting. I mean, what use is casting? I don't know, not much if it's on a builder that you're not playing actively, but just the fact that the rolls can be as high as 411 on the stats, and I got it from here, not even mixed mode, Nightmare Hardcore Survival Promenade, and that's awesome. So I would like to put a video together, like the lowest stats possible, like a low stat run for finishing Wave 25 Nightmare Hardcore Promenade, but more of the same here, laying down some harpoon action, trying to take advantage of the straight lines as much as I can, which is, this build in particular, is so unlike how I would build this for if I had like my actual hero deck. It's weird. I'm looking specifically for lines. I built super close to that crystal down there. I would never do that if I were just building this out for, say, a full hero deck, but given that I'm working with the harpoons here and I want some straight lines, that seems like the best course of action. But yeah, this map end game, so Nightmare Hardcore Survival, Wave 25 and whatnot, the easiest thing to do is there's a platform right behind me right now where there's some grass and stuff. You throw a stack of DSTs up there, hang out on a DPS Hunters, gun down the copters. It's easy, and it's the reason I would say this is worthy of a stop to farm up some hardcore Nightmare Survival giraffes is simply because it is worlds easier than Glitterhelm and the Summit. I think the Summit's a little harder than Glitterhelm, but this is just so much easier that it's totally worth it. Totally worth stopping off and running some giraffe pet runs for a little while, because you'll want to farm a bunch of those up anyway, because each of your builders, that's easily the best in slot. Like if you have a builder that you're building defenses on and then you're putting him away for another hero, so you're not playing that hero actively, the best thing you can have on that hero is anything that's going to load you up with defense stats, and the Giraffe on a Treadmill is bar none the best. So you want to farm up a bunch. You want a really good Giraffe on each of your builders, and that may mean that you want 5 or 6 or 7 really good ones. I know that I have one of each for my 4 core builders. And then I also have a Waller Apprentice and a Harpoon Squire, and they both need a Giraffe. And then I really, really want to make another Squire for Bouncers and Slice and Dice. I like the idea of that, and he would need one too. So, always a good idea to farm up a bunch of those Giraffes, and this map is the perfect place to do it. The perfect place if you're not fully kitted out with like 4,000 power and whatnot. Like if you don't have some crazy high endgame stats, you can do it with some pretty reasonable stats, and I'm looking forward to putting that together. I think that's going to be a good one. As for this current Squire only run in Promenade, I'm laying in these harpoons thick. I mean, they are effective, they are getting the job done. I'm just finding weird spots to cram them in on the lanes now, just as much as I can, because why not? What else am I going to do with this DU? You know what I've never thought of is that little tiny island there floating. Probably a good place to put something. I don't think anything can get to that. I don't think spiders can get to that. So that might be a cool spot to drop some DSTs or something. I don't know. I'll have to mess with that later on. But yeah, it's a great map for running some giraffes and stuff. And obviously, it's not too bad here, as you can see for the harpoons. There are a lot of long straight lines. This is a weird spot. I wasn't thrilled with this. I really don't like building that close to a crystal, but I just didn't see a better option, and it turns out that it's totally fine. It works out fine for me here anyway, at least. One thing I just noticed that I do overlook, at least on that back door where I have the harpoons in the wall at the bottom of that curve, right behind me right now, is that I did not account for the grade of the slope of the land, and the harpoons seem to be sticking into the ground, not too far off from where they're shot. So I would, if in retrospect, I would probably build that on a flatter spot, and I could see myself getting more travel time out of the harpoons in that situation. Yeah, this door back here, these 3 harpoons, I should have moved them down a little bit on a flatter spot. Would have made more sense, but they still get the job done. I'm just looking at efficiency and how well things actually worked. It's easy to see this stuff in hindsight, but yeah, there's an ogre that comes out here, and it's easy enough to deal with. The harpoons. Once you have 3 harpoons on an ogre, I mean, with these stats, that's plenty. That's plenty of power attacking these yellow ogres at least. So the Squire is one of my favorite active heroes to be on. The fact that he has a melee attack as his primary, and he has a hero boost that ups your damage and your run speed, and then also, you know, you can block, so you can be a wall in a pinch. You can become a wall. It's really cool that he has a pretty specific skill set. You know, he's very much unlike the other 3 heroes that are ranged DPS focused. Though I'm assuming that we're going to get some new heroes pretty soon. And, you know, in DD1, you had a barbarian class, which you could equip 2 weapons, hold 1 in each hand, and you run around and you were a blender. I mean, you could just tear things up. And even though he was melee and not ranged, he could do some serious damage, and he was a lot of fun to play, and a useful member to a team, too, for that matter. You also had other classes that specialized in certain things that I'm really looking forward to getting back. Like the Jester was all about ranged damage. You had 2 guns you could swap between, and that class could move towers around. So once they were placed, one of the Jester's abilities were, like, say you didn't like the placement of a tower, but you didn't want to sell it or replace it or anything, you could literally pick it up and move it to another location. Really cool. And we also had the, well, my core got attacked here, but whatever it was went down pretty quick. We also had the, oh yeah, this wall went down. It's just what happens if you don't pay attention. It's no good. We also had the Summoner class, which was my favorite, and it was actually my quote-unquote main when I played DD1. It was a class that when the DLC dropped, a lot of people didn't get it. So I was often one of the only people who had a Summoner that when we did play. But that's the win on Promenade. Moving on up to the summit, the big cheese, the boss fight, the big kahuna. It's going to go down pretty soon. Now I have a lengthy inventory management session here, attempting to maximize my gear, level my stats and whatnot. You know, a lot of the way I do things here is not the way I would do them if I were playing through from the beginning, say, and this was not a character who had a beginning and an end. You know, if this was one of my quote-unquote forever characters that I was going to use for the entire time I was playing, I would do things a little different. For example, I'm using a common weapon as opposed to an uncommon one because it's slightly better in terms of stats, and I am assuming that this is the end of this character's life cycle, so, you know, I'm investing in a weapon that I wouldn't normally. But that's why I speed through these inventory management sessions. There are my stats there. Sitting at 29 fortify, 109 power, 38 range, and 57 defense rate. I add a couple things here and there. Minor changes. I one more fort for power just to make it 30. That's just me having OCD. But anyway, yeah, those are my stats, and that's what I run in with for this build and the boss fight. But On the Necromancer from DD1, or the Summoner, yeah, he didn't use a weapon. He was purely a Summoner, but he could equip 2 pets, which was cool. So you would equip, like, you know how the Dragon Pet in this game shoots projectiles. There were other projectile shooting pets in that game. You'd equip 2 pets, and you can kind of run around and do some damage, but you were kind of soft, so you didn't really want to be in the fray. You would get hit. But then also, you could fly. So you could hold the space button, and then you would like kind of hover around for a while, and you could survey the battlefield that way. And your towers, quote unquote, were actually summons, like creatures that you would summon, and then you can move them around. You could tell them to walk around and stuff or do things. And one of the strategies was you would make walls out of your archers. So you would lay down like 5 or 6 archers instead of a spike blockade. In DD1, the Summoner had his own DU pool, summoning unit points, or whatever they were called. So if you didn't have a Summoner on the field, essentially you were missing out on extra defenses, because having your own DU pool to pull from meant that you had no impact on what everyone else was doing. You could do whatever you wanted as the Summoner, and it made no difference to the defenses elsewhere on the field. But you can see me moving some stuff around here. It's questionable whether or not it really mattered. I'm attempting to move my walls up so that my harpoons don't get cleaved, or splash damage from the boss's fireballs don't just take everything out all in one shot. But gonna G up here, and I do actually move these down to the next straight line. Now these spots are perfect for harpoons. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better spot. Long straight lines like that are beautiful for the harpoon. But I quickly realized that, this spot down here would have made more sense. So that way they had less travel time. Even though it's not quite as long, I would rather just kill the enemies a little sooner. But yeah, during the early days of the Summoner DLC, just so few people had one, and I fell in love with them right away, and I leveled mine up really, really quick. So I wound up being the only one of the few people that played online that had one of level to actually contribute to meaningful endgame building, and it was really fun. That was I think kind of what really hooked me into the franchise, because one of the things with the Summoner was that you could switch into this RTS mode, sort of, where I played games like Command and Conquer and Warcraft when I was growing up. So that was sort of my introduction to strategy gaming, and the fact that I could play Dungeon Defenders like a shooter or like an RTS was really, really appealing. I love games where you can choose the way you play it. Like, most people don't think Dark Souls and Pokemon have anything in common, but player agency is the through line there. I mean, you can play the games however you want. You can do some weird stuff in Pokemon. You can play through the whole game with a Rattata, You can play through all of Dark Souls 3 with a bow. You can do whatever you want. It just comes down to making the right decisions, and it's player agency. You can do whatever you want. It's not on rails. There's not some set experience. You can play through the game however you like, and Dungeon Defenders, tower defense in general, really lends itself to that format, but Dungeon Defenders in particular, the fact that it's also kind of an action RPG on top of all those tower defense elements, so awesome, so much fun. I didn't know that this was my favorite genre of video game until I found Dungeon Defenders, which is why I am so faithful to the franchise. I didn't love DD2. I was kind of disappointed by that. I understood the model, and it probably helped the company out quite a bit. A free-to-play game is going to be very popular, and some free-to-play games are excellent. I mean, I have, I think, 600 hours into Warframe. It's a great game, another game that emphasizes player agency, tons of different frames, tons of different mod setups and weapons and whatnot. But DD2, I'm sure it did some good things with the company and put the franchise on the map. I know things went south with the company itself, and it's under new ownership and whatnot, Chromatic Games, trendy, blah, blah, blah. But, I didn't get into DD2, but I loved DD1 so much that as soon as I saw the Kickstarter notice, geez, it was, I think it was not last March, but the March before, that I saw it on, like, an ad on Facebook or something, and I was like, oh yeah, and I threw my money at them right away. I mean, I went right in on it, because I had wished for a proper See, these should be bouncers. I don't know why I'm making these harpoons. They should be bouncers. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking maybe the boss will actually... I'm thinking maybe they'll do some damage to the boss. That's probably what I was thinking. But I had wanted a proper sequel to DD1 for so long, and then I saw DDA coming out, and I'm like, yes, this is it. DD2 didn't scratch the itch for me nearly as much, but it was a grindy kind of free-to-play franchise, or free-to-play model. Now, these harpoons up here, a little questionable. They do some good for me, but if I were to do this again, I end up putting 2 on this lane, 1 on each of those gargoyles. They do contribute, but you know, I should really try to have had... I should have tried having 1 in each lane, so it would have made 1 in each boss lane. So the boss can appear here, and then in 2 other places. Having 1 set up in each lane to begin with would have been better. So bouncers up on those flyer lanes would have saved me some DU over harpoons. Bouncers in general for all the flyer lanes would have made more sense. Would have saved me some DU. Hindsight's 2020, and I learned a lot about this map running it on hardcore survival and nightmare in terms of what works and what doesn't. But yeah, you can see my wall went down there. Got to rethink my strategy. Got to adapt to obviously the failing of my build here. So and I didn't level things up and pay enough attention to what was going on. I'm too concerned with setting up for the boss and whatnot, which is, I would say, not a wise investment of your time if you can just chill during the build phase like I am here. But I slapped this one up here, and what I should have done was left the 1 here, put another 1 in each of the where the boss can show up to fight you, and then made it so that I had enough DU for 3. Because right now I'm sitting on 12 DU. That is my boss fight DU. I use that to do damage to the boss. You'll see that. Oh yeah, some more. I put them into fortify because I'm thinking, well, my wall went down. I really need to fortify. The lack of specialization into spike blockades is just barely starting to show here. To where if I were doing this in insane, I could see it being even more of a challenge not having a specialized spike blockade character. But I have some harpoons up on that ridge there next to the gargoyles. Those should be bouncers, and the ones on the top ridges where the other flyer lanes are, those should also be bouncers. That would free up some more DU for me to have 1 harpoon at each of the boss lanes. Each of the... See, here's another area where the boss can show up to fight you, and he just sits here. And if you had a harpoon up here, it would shoot him constantly, dealing more damage. So I should have had 1 harpoon at each of those areas. And then bouncers up here. So like this should be a bouncer. And then bouncers in the other 2 flyer lanes that you can see right here. That harpoon should also be a bouncer in my opinion. And then I'd have more DU to play with, and I could drop a harpoon in each boss staging area and have 2 harpoons that I can put down and pick up. And yeah, I actually do replace it with a bouncer. How about that? Well, there you go. There you have it. I do that. So, but that would be ideal if I could have worked that out. But I didn't think about it. Oh well, you know, I don't think I'll do this specific thing again, but hey, if anyone else is recreating this and trying it out for themselves, I totally think anyone who's watching, if you want to have a go at this, do it. It was fun. And, you know, you will learn about the maps in a different way. You'll learn about the way you can use defenses. You'll learn about lanes in a different way. It's definitely a different perspective. Here my wall goes down, and this is what I was talking about when you play a Squire as your active hero. You can become the wall, so you can block. No other hero can do this. Very unique to the Squire. One of my favorite things about the Squire, and one of the things that makes them the most useful hero to be on the field. You know, no other hero is capable of just coming over and holding a lane down and just waiting out the storm there like a Squire can. So I really enjoy the endgame multiplayer aspect of Dungeon Defenders Awakened so far, but you know, Squires are kind of relegated to just holding on to pets. But here we go, boss prep time. I'm just replacing that wall really, and I guess my bouncer went down here because I didn't level it up, and my fortify is so low that of course it went down. But yeah, now this was a missed opportunity. If I had been over there and been dealing with the boss right away, I could have gotten a shot off on him sooner. But anyway, here we go. This is the boss fight. This was actually a really cool fight. Now what I do is I wait until he's in front of it, and then I pull it, because there's some travel time on the bolt on that ballista that you have to account for. Otherwise, you will miss. He's behind me, and I didn't even notice it. But here's what I do to deal with the boss now. I just drop some harpoons. And then I kind of have to... you drop them off at an angle. You just saw his attack there where he jumps in with his mouth and tries to bite you. If you put harpoons in these places and angle them toward him, his bites will miss. But you have to watch out for his fireballs, because he shoots them, they go past you, and then they loop back around and try to hit you. You can bait them into going off the stage if you want, but you have to be aware of them. I try to do some melee damage here. Not worth the risk, really. The harpoons are doing so much better at dealing damage to him than I am. That's the main disadvantage to a Squire as an active hero. That harpoon's going to go down, of course. Level 1, very low fortify. What are you going to do? But he goes away anyway. But there you go. That's a total of like a 4th or 5th of his HP bar. I try to get this ballista shot off, and I don't get to it in time. I had needed to be quicker. I should have been less concerned about selling my my harpoon there. But he's in a weird spot now. This is just him throwing fireballs. I can't do anything to him here, and this is the major disadvantage of not playing a ranged hero. Is in this situation, there's nothing I can do, so I'm just kind of going around and repairing things, keeping an eye out on my defenses, because of course I do need them to hold up as well. I can't have a crystal go down. I miss another opportunity to shoot him here. And then this is a little tough. When he's dancing around in front of a ballista like this, it's not easy to hit him. You kind of have to anticipate him going back center. That's not very easy to do in this situation. Here anyway, he flies away, and I do make it to this ballista in time to fire it off, but I miss him. So, but now he's dancing around in front of it again, and I get another chance. I do, at that point, you can see when he's drifting back center to his little figure 8 pattern that he's flying around in front of that, that's when you pull the trigger on the ballista and get him. So, here's the case where I was saying that I should have had 1 harpoon apiece at each of these areas to begin with, and then had bouncers up for each of the flyer lanes instead of harpoons. But this is what I mean with the fireballs. He shoots them past me, and then they loop back around. So I'm not quite getting that yet. They end up hitting me and preventing me from dropping another harpoon. So I do miss out on some damage here, and it's unfortunate just how slow my my drop speed is on those towers. I assume that's what casting would help. Casting would benefit build time as well as repair. So yeah, that's going to take some damage there from the fire, but not go down. And of course, as soon as I get that second ballista down, he goes away. Big surprise. Going to sell these real quick. On to the next spot. Of course, again, I sort of miss him here. He's hanging out throwing fireballs, but he's not in front of the ballista, and I don't know if that's intended. I'm kind of thinking maybe he should have been in front of this one. I'm not sure what the deal is here, but he's dancing around in front of the corner, and now he's coming back. So now's a perfect opportunity to let it rip, get him right in the side there. And I believe he ends up in the middle here. And I take this opportunity to get some mana, because I do want that for dropping my harpoons and repairs and stuff like that. So you can see the 2 harpoons on the gargoyles are actually doing some damage to him here. There's a nice shot of them actually doing some damage. Some of the angles that they hit him at too do some pierce damage. So they pierce him and hit him multiple times. Some of the shots do, at least. But I do get a chance to drop another harpoon here. I drop it a little sideways just to avoid some of that fire a little bit, and I do notice that these are going down. That's another reason to have a bunch of mana on hand, is that you can drop some quick upgrades to use as repairs. That way you don't have to stand there and repair the whole time. But he goes away again, but that was very productive, mostly because I had those 2 already ready to go. And that's kind of the strategy too if you're doing this solo. I have a low stats sort of a nightmare hardcore campaign run that I'll leave a card for that if you're interested. But I set up like a ton of DSTs right there, and as soon as he spawns, he just takes a bunch of damage, and then I chase him around with my staff, and then I finish him off with the apprentice's range damage. Obviously not an option for me here, but something sort of an analogy. But yeah, it would have made more sense to have a harpoon ready to go at each. That way he's always being dealt damage when he comes in and hangs out here like this. Now, the fireballs are going to come around, but I'm placing myself in a specific spot here so that I'm thinking if the fireballs go past me and come back, they'll hit the back of the stairs. That was what I was hoping. You can see they hit the wall there. They don't do damage to me. That's pretty nice. But this fire damage, sometimes it hits the harpoons for quite a bit of damage, and sometimes only a little. Not sure what the deal is with that, but I don't think I get him here. Oh, I did. That's good. Yeah, I had to hit the boost there just to make it in time, and then I barely snagged the shot on him. You know, in this particular fight, he does not go center very much, and I'm realizing the flaw there in that I should have had ballistas ready to go elsewhere, but I'm used to him showing up in the center more often. I've killed this boss so many times when I was farming him for that video I just mentioned with the apprentice, and he stayed in the center quite a bit when he would get hit by the ballistas. Not so much for me for this round, not so much for my luck here. And of course, I go down, foolishly running into the fire. Whoops. Oh well. Fortunately, it's not hardcore, and he is almost dead. These harpoons still hammering away, down to 10k HP, 8k HP. So one more shot with the ballistas will do it, and I do run up here, pull the trigger, bam, I got him. That's it. That's a wrap here. I'm flexing on him, flexing on the dragon boss. That is a wrap for Act 3, Squire only. And in all my excitement, here's my huge blunder that I mentioned earlier. I am up here on the circle, and I G up. Now, if you don't know why that's a problem, I didn't open the chest. If you don't open the chest, you don't get what's inside it. What's inside it? The only pet that I would have gotten on this guy, period. So I missed the opportunity for my pet. Now that'll just be an empty slot forever. Oh well. Spoiler, I go back and get him a rock pet off camera, just because I wanted to have something. And I just went and got one. But now we're in Glitterhelm for the encore, of course. The Glitterhelm, it's more or less a lot of the same. Going to be abusing harpoons and spike blockades here, of course. That's sort of my tried and true for this entire run. And being that this map is so big, you know, it's easy enough to cover things and then forget about them, but when you go up in the difficulties, it is not as easy. And you really have to trust your build and have the stats to hold it down. You know, I do think that the summit is a little more difficult, but not by much, and you do have to get good at placing things in such a way on endgame Glitterhelm runs that you take advantage of things like DSTs for the survival, in which you take advantage of the fact that they can shoot through walls. For instance, you can just place a DST literally anywhere. It's going to shoot through the wall and kill whatever it's aimed at. And there's some cheeky spots like this. I try to put a harpoon. You can put a tower up there. There's all kinds of weird spots that you can place things on Glitterhelm that it's really cool. Like every little crystal, every little thing. There's a lot of things that you can, if you just see some of the scenery, a lot of that stuff you can just straight up slap a tower on top of. But here's a nice straight line. I'm going to throw some walls down here. And a spike wall, I think one is good, and then some more harpoons here. Nice straight line there to take advantage of, and there's a harpoon there covering a flyer lane. And it looks like I'm just about good to go here. Going to lay in the rest of my harpoons as much as I can with the remaining build mana. And I do have flyer lanes covered here. I have both lanes covered with one harpoon there. Going to be plenty, but I'm sure I'll be changing things along the way a little bit. So if anyone's been playing current DDA and your endgame, right now actually the test servers are going up and they're active at the moment for the Massacre Survival stuff that's coming, which is cool. I'm going to get in and do that probably shortly after I edit this video and start messing with that, so that should be really fun. And I'm curious to see how Glitterhelm pans out, Massacre Survival. I don't think any of us are going to be able to finish it right now, but yeah, it should be really fun. I'm really looking forward to Massacre Survival coming out because, you know, after you finish the Massacre campaign, what do you got to do left? Well, I guess farm Nightmare Hardcore Survival, but with Massacre out, that'll be a whole other level of endgame content. You know, if your standard experience with Dungeon Defenders Awakened now is, say, 200 to 300 hours, if you blow through it, maybe 400 if you take your time. With the advent of Massacre Survival, see, there's that cheeky spot that I like for a nice harpoon. You can put a flame burst there too if you're playing on an apprentice. But with the addition of Massacre Survival, we're talking 1,000+ hours now you'll get out of the game, possibly more. I mean, endless, really. Massacre Survival is going to be brutal, and that's the idea. What's the point of having crazy high stats and really good gear and top rolls on pets and whatnot if you don't have Massacre Survival to use them in. It's not too late to apply to get into that test if you're interested, and if you're watching or listening to this by now, I guess I should have mentioned it at the top. But if you're interested, it's cavalry@chromatic.games. You email them, they send you some stuff back. You have to be 18 or older. You have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and you have to be able to use Discord, and that's pretty much it. And once you do those things, you are qualified to be a part of the test group. And yeah, let me know if you get in. Hop in the Discord if you're listening to this and you've made it this far. My Discord is linked in every video, so feel free to hop in, say hello. We run games with each other quite a bit. We do runs for pets and survival and whatnot, all kinds of stuff. Massacre campaign runs we were just doing last week, I think. Ran through a bunch of the Massacre campaign. A lot of fun. And it seems to be a nice community coming up, and it's good. So hop in and say hi if you're interested. But as far as the map is concerned, just dropping some upgrades on the poons, as I do. At this point, my stats are more than where they need to be to finish Glitterhelm. I think Glitterhelm is just in general a little easier, if it's more spread out. So that's the only thing in terms of difficulty that I would say is a more or so. But it's an easy map to defend. It's just huge. So that's the only thing really. But tons of mana here, tons of mana to upgrade stuff. I throw down a second wall just to be safe. Throwing some upgrades around just to make sure that everything stays up. That way I kind of want to forget about this area of the map. So I spend a lot of the mana on the things back there. That way I can just kind of leave everything alone and assume it's fine. Oh, and then another thing with the Squire is, see how I'm glowing red right now? I'm using my hero boost. Don't forget about that. You know, if you want to just run around faster on a big map like this, absolutely hit that C key or use your hero power, your second ability button, and yeah, use it. Use that boost. You might as well. What else are you doing with your player mana, really? But here is the wave 5 start. Wave 5, middle of wave 5 rather. Glitterhelm unique in that it is 6 waves, so one extra wave of enemies coming at you that you need to live through. See, there you go. I mean, this map is enormous. It's a bit of a gauntlet, and it's a lot for you to run around and babysit everything. But this is one of the maps that benefits the most from multiplayer for sure. Everyone just kind of has their own little corner or whatever. But yeah, a line of harpoons behind some walls, gonna do it. Gonna hold it down. Just gonna add the level up stats here to mostly to power and defense rate. But I'm sitting pretty with stats. I have plenty to get through this with. And yeah, I'm not concerned at all about whether or not I'll actually be able to do this, because as it's been, things have been going really smooth. And I have tons of stuff upgraded, tons of harpoons down, laying off of the bouncers and slice and dice towers. Still having some sore feelings about when I lost from previous games, trying them out and whatnot. But, you know, a bouncer or two would be appropriate for flyer lanes here. Would make sense. But I use the harpoons pretty effectively, so I don't regret using harpoons here instead of bouncers. I think they do just fine. But we are about halfway through here, wave 6. So, yeah, we're coming up on the end of the series here for the Squire hard campaign. And I would absolutely love some feedback on this series, so if you would like to see it continue into Insane with a full deck of Squires or just this one, let me know. I'm willing to do either. I like the idea of a full deck of Squires. That'd be cool. Yeah, I like the idea of the Huntress and Monk playthrough also, and the Apprentice playthrough also has an appeal. So I'm willing to do them all. It's hard to prioritize them. I do also want to pump out as many guides as I can. Low stat build guides, tips videos, that sort of thing. So the stuff that I know is going to do really well right away, especially for newer players. So it's a little difficult to prioritize doing this sort of stuff when I know that stuff is going to do so much better and probably help a lot of people. But no, I still want to do this sort of thing too. And this series was super fun to make, and I'm glad I did it. But that is going to conclude the hard campaign playthrough for my Squire only guy. And I do believe I show my stats here one last time. Rounding out the series, 38 fortify, 129 for power, 41 for range, and 64 for defense rate. Fully ready to jump into Insane if I so choose. But yeah, that'll do it for me. Thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate everything. And I feel like I say this a lot, but just thank you. Thank you so much for the support.